Hello everybody and welcome back to our Bible study. Today we're talking about Psalm 86, and I'm sorry that I've missed a couple days here recently on the study. The reason was because my computer broke, or at least I thought my computer broke, and I was trying to work off my iPad and it just wasn't working. And luckily the computer didn't actually break, it was just the connection of the charger and some electrical issue. And so I was able finally to track down another charger, and so now I have a functioning computer and it's a little bit easier to work. So Lord willing, we'll be back to daily Bible studies. Today we are on Psalm 86, and we're once again returning to our favorite psalmist, who is David. This one is by David again, and I was not able to find any New Testament references to Psalm 86. Our themes for today: a plea for God's help in the day of trouble. And number 2, God, the Lord of Lords, is able to deliver anyone from their day of trouble. And 2 terms to define today. The first one we've seen before, it's the word Sheol. This is the place of the dead or the grave. Maybe a way to think about it is the place where the spirits or the souls of the dead are gathered. And our second word is insolent. This appears in verse 14. Being insolent is being contemptuous or rude or arrogant or lacking respect. On page number 2, we see that Psalm 86 has 17 verses, and I've titled them A Prayer for God's Help. Pretty basic. And the reason for that is because we've seen these ideas before. So Psalm 86, as we mentioned, is another Psalm of David, and he's once again going to return to some very, very similar themes that we've seen a number of times already in the Psalms. David was crying out to the Lord he was in a tough situation, and we don't know all the details about the situation that he was in, but we can see that he was relying on God to get him through it. He asked God to listen to his prayer, to preserve his life, to give him grace, teach him his ways, and to gladden his soul. David knew that the God of Israel could get him out of his, quote, day of trouble, because God was superior to any of the idols or the false gods that were worshipped by foreign nations. David was, once again, struggling with enemies, insolent men. That's that word that we defined. Insolent men, godless men had risen up to oppose him. And David contrasts God and his nature to these insolent men. He says that God was gracious, he was merciful. Unlike these men, he was slow to anger, full of steady love and faithfulness. So David asks for God's strength, and he asks the Lord to give him a sign. And this sign would act as a signal of God's support for David, and it would put his enemies to shame. So that is Psalm 86. Are you ready for our application today? God doesn't get tired of hearing your repetitive prayers so long as your prayers are prayed from a faithful heart. And how do we learn this from Psalm 86? Well, I don't have an exact count, but David has prayed, I think, at least 24 prayers asking God for help with his enemies and help with his days of trouble. And when I say he's prayed 24 prayers, I mean he's written 24 psalms that are almost exactly like this in their theme and in just the overall idea. And it really seems that God didn't get tired of hearing David pray these prayers and write these psalms, because he includes them all in the Bible. There may be prayers that you pray repeatedly and you wonder, does God get tired of me praying for this? Maybe you have some sin that you need help with. Maybe there's a persistent problem at your church. Maybe you have a lost family member. Maybe you have a family member with a chronic illness. What we can learn from Psalm 86 and the many psalms similar before it is that God is not going to put us on mute. He wants to hear those prayers. So don't grow discouraged thinking that you're annoying God or that he's not listening anymore. Repetitive prayers prayed from the right heart are a mark of someone who looks to God daily and leans on him consistently to help with life's toughest challenges.